Hello, I'm Benjamin Fry, and today we're going to be talking about how evolution didn't design us to be happy, but designed us to survive. And so now we need to hack our evolution to find our happiness and find our bliss. One of the things that people seem to want is to be happy. And this is understandable. And yet it's slightly at odds with the way that we've evolved to become who we are on this planet. And this can seem quite confusing because you'd think that for an organism to thrive, happiness would be really important. But in fact, that's not true. The factor which makes an organism thrive through evolution is survival, not happiness. So these two things can pull in opposite directions, not necessarily on purpose, but by accident, because that's just the way things have turned out to be for us human beings at this stage of our evolution on this planet. It's a little bit complicated to understand why. So it's easier if you go back to the beginning of the development of mammalian nervous systems, which come from reptiles and from fish, and understand that for hundreds of millions of years ago, there was a much simpler architecture in our nervous systems and how we respond to threat. So a jawless fish, for example, was the first organism which developed the physical infrastructure that we now see that helps organisms to freeze. So you can imagine this as a kind of story of evolution. Imagine the fish are swimming around in the ocean, and sharks and dolphins and birds occasionally prey on them. There's millions of fish. They're swimming around in schools of thousands. And the sharks come up and they eat whatever they want and then they go away. Now, how do these fish begin to successfully adapt so they can survive this predation, this attack? But it seems that what happened is the fish started to be able to freeze in response to threat. And you can imagine that if a school of fish is swimming through the ocean, a shark is oriented towards movement. So it's going to find the fish that are swimming and running away from it. So the fish that then stop are going to become invisible to the shark. This means they don't get eaten. This means they have more children. And this means in the next generation of fish, there's more that stop, more that freeze, and so on and so forth. The end result of this is that all the fish that learn to freeze end up surviving and having lots of children, and all the fish that don't end up getting eaten by all the sharks. And this means that we now have a new way of dealing with threat. It's called an adaptation. So there's an adapted response to dealing with predation. Now, this may not seem very interesting in relation to our modern world, but unfortunately, we see that it has a significant effect on who we become and how we respond to threats in our life, and therefore the effect on our mental health. Because the next thing that happens is that the sharks then start to starve because they can't find any fish. So they then start to adapt to find fish that are not moving. And so then the next generation of fish need to learn to actually, rather than freeze, to run. And this is called fight and flight. So the fish might fight for their life, they might run away, and the fish that do this first are the fish that then get away quickest, and they're the ones that have the most children, and so on and so forth. And then the sharks adapt to deal with that, and then the fish have to adapt to become more aware of sharks earlier on, and this is called vigilance. So the fish that notice the sharks in their environment more quickly are the ones that then fight or flight quicker, and they get away, and so on and so forth. Now, a very interesting thing has happened as we moved through fish and through reptiles and into mammals and into higher primates, is that we've developed another way of responding to threat, which is called the social engagement system. So now, as humans, we tend to socialize and to try to make friends and to try to gain influence as a part of the way that we respond to the threat of other mammals or even other humans. We see this in large primates in the way they organize their societies, they organize their families, they organize their communities, and we do the same. Now, what's interesting about all this is that you're building blocks of responses to threat, to life and death threat, predation, as it's called in the wild, which are very different to each other. They're like discrete, different ways of dealing with things. So you might call it the reptile response is to freeze, and the mammalian response is to fight and flight, and the human response is social engagement. Well, however you look at it, what we see in humans now is that our response to dealing with threat goes the other way. So we start off at the beginning with the social engagement system. We'll try to make friends with someone who maybe seems a little bit edgy. And then we'll get a little bit worried about it because it's not working. That's our vigilance kicking in. Then we'll see it as a genuine threat and we'll either run for our life or fight for our life. And if we become overwhelmed, then we freeze. Now, all of this is fine and it helps us to survive. And it's the reason why we're alive today and not our cousins who didn't develop these strategies. But the problem is that it doesn't make us happy. And there's a very specific reason for that, which is that when we go through these reverse gears in evolution, we sometimes get stuck and don't come back. And this is the problem of running away from an invisible lion. We get stuck in the place where the lion is chasing us and it continues to chase us for the rest of our lives. So if we go back all the way to freeze, the problem is that we need to unfreeze. So we go back to being a jawless fish swimming in the ocean, completely frozen. And in a human, this might mean being spaced out, it might mean being dissociated, it might mean feeling kind of checked out of your body or your environment, or you're not really there. It doesn't have to mean that you're literally frozen like a fish in the wild. But the problem is wherever we go, wherever we leave ourselves, wherever we abandon the energy of fight flight, we need to come back. And if we don't come back, then we end up stuck there. And if we end up stuck there, then we're living through, on some level, either frozen or active, our worst nightmares over and over and over again. And this is why people so often repeat in their lives the things that they wish not to happen again, but somehow seem magnetically drawn to making these things reoccur, either people, places, or things. It often happens in relationships or in jobs or in the way that we encounter our lives and encounter ourselves. It seems like we're being dragged round and round in circles, in vortexes that take us into the places that we most wish to escape from and plan to escape from, and yet somehow our body, or sometimes people say our unconscious, takes us back to where we didn't want to be. Now, if that's happening to you, it's much more useful to understand it as a consequence, a healthy consequence of the adaptations that helped us to evolve and to survive, than it is to look at it as some kind of personal failing. Because the truth is that if we hadn't evolved in that way, we wouldn't be the species that had survived the best. We wouldn't be here to think about it and talk about it. So rather than blame yourself or look at yourself or judge yourself for experiencing difficulties in life over and over again and therefore not being happy, it's much more useful to see yourself as a successful adapter, both evolutionarily to threat and also individually to the threats you've had in your life. And see that you're a hero, you survived, you've done all these things to protect yourself, and now you're safe, it's time to let them go. So undoing this is simply a process of getting back into your body, getting back to those reactions that you haven't finished happening, and being able to unfreeze the frozen material that you found difficult to process. So if you look at the resources on the Invisible Lion website, you'll see, for example, the body scan will help you get back in your body. A 28-day recovery plan is a plan to help you work through the exercises to get into those places in your body that are unfinished and to work with that material. And you might find that there's significant change and improvement to be had there, which then, like a chain of dominoes, leads forward into your thinking, into your sense of reality, into your relationships and your choices. And that can change your life from being something that goes round and round in circles in the places you least want it to being something that can make you move forward in life and be happier, more fulfilled, and more successful. Thank you for listening. This was Benjamin Fry talking to you about some of the material from my recent book, The Invisible Lion, which I wrote because of countless consultations and lectures and workshops with people trying to explain how to make life, themselves and their nervous systems more easily understood. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see more, please go to theinvisiblelion.com. You can find details on the book and further resources to help you explore these concepts.